My daughter-in-law planned a 3-day reunion for 20 people at my beach house without asking me. Then she texted me a grocery list, told me to fill the fridge, and even gave my bedroom to her parents. So I changed the locks, waited for them to arrive, and when she screamed, "Why can't we get in?" I hung up. When people mistake your kindness for permission, a locked door can teach them the lesson your words never could. My name is Eleanor. I am 68 years old, and the exact moment I realized my daughter-in-law viewed me merely as a free property manager was on a quiet Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table, drinking black tea, when a notification suddenly popped up on my tablet. It was a family group chat, created by my daughter-in-law, Chloe. The message detailed a massive 3-day family reunion for her side of the family. The location was my private beach house down the coast. I stared at the screen, reading the detailed itinerary she had already finalized. 20 people were arriving on Friday. My son, Mark, was also in the chat. He typed nothing. He just let her commandeer my home. Then came the second message, directly tagging me. Chloe wrote that I needed to fill the fridge with specific groceries before they arrived, and requested that I stay in the small guest room so her parents could have the master suite. She ended it with a smiley face. I read those words twice, not out of confusion, but with a profound sense of clarity. There was no request, no polite inquiry about my schedule or permission. To them, my lifelong hard work was just a convenient resource to be consumed. The beach house was my sanctuary. Purchased after my husband passed away, it was my quiet place. Over the last year, Chloe had slowly started acting like she owned it, leaving messes, inviting friends, and demanding spare keys. Mark always made excuses, avoiding conflict at all costs. I watched the chat fill with replies from her relatives claiming bedrooms. A younger version of me would have cried, called Mark, or tried to negotiate to keep the peace. Instead, I simply set my tea down. I did not type a long, emotional response. I did not explain my hurt feelings. I packed a small overnight bag, grabbed my purse, and prepared to drive down to the coast today. Silence. The drive to the beach house took 3 hours, giving me plenty of time to think. I did not feel angry, just incredibly tired. Chloe had always been a very practical woman. She viewed relationships as transactions. When she married Mark, I welcomed her warmly. I paid for half their wedding and helped them secure a good mortgage on their first house. I thought generosity would build a strong foundation for our growing family. I was completely wrong. Generosity without firm boundaries only creates entitlement. Over time, my money became an expectation. Just last month, she complained loudly at dinner about their expensive streaming subscriptions and cell phone plans, staring directly at me until I offered to cover them. Mark sat quietly, eating his meal without saying a single word. His passivity enabled her behavior perfectly. I realized then that I was partly responsible. I had trained them to treat me this way. As I drove down the highway, I made my first real decision. I pulled into a rest stop, parked my car, and opened my banking application. In less than 5 minutes, I canceled the automatic payments for their streaming services and removed Mark as an authorized user on my primary credit card. I felt a sudden, sharp wave of pure relief wash over me. It was not about punishing them. It was simply about closing the open door they had been walking through without wiping their feet. The phone buzzed. Chloe texted, asking if I had left for the grocery store yet. She added that her father preferred a specific imported beer. I looked at the bright screen for a moment, smiled softly to myself, and placed the phone face down on the passenger seat. I merged back onto the highway and kept driving south. The real preparations for this grand weekend reunion were only just beginning. I felt incredibly focused and awake. Change was coming fast. Everything would be different very soon. Let them plan it. I arrived at the beach house just before noon. The coastal air was crisp, smelling faintly of salt and pine. Walking through the front door, I immediately noticed the lingering signs of Chloe's last uninvited visit. A pair of her sandals remained kicked under the entryway table. 3 empty sunscreen bottles cluttered the bathroom counter. She treated my home like a hotel without a checkout time. I walked straight to the utility drawer and grabbed a heavy-duty trash bag. I did not fold her leftover belongings or neatly pack them away into a convenient storage box. I simply tossed the sandals, the empty bottles, and a forgotten sun hat into the bag and set it near the garage. Next, I walked to the front door and stared at the electronic keypad lock. Mark had installed it 2 years ago, claiming it would be easier for everyone to use. I knew Chloe had freely shared the access code with her parents and sisters. I opened the lock's control panel on my smartphone. With 3 deliberate taps, I deleted every single saved code. I created a brand new master code known only to me, just to be absolutely certain. I disabled the remote unlock feature entirely. No one was entering this house without my physical permission. Then, I moved to the garage side door, the only entry point that still used a traditional metal key. Mark kept a spare copy on his keychain. I immediately called a local handyman I trusted. He arrived within 40 minutes, replaced the deadbolt, and handed me the only 2 existing keys. I paid him in cash and thanked him for his prompt service. My house was finally sealed. It was no longer a shared family asset or a free vacation rental. It was a private fortress. I made myself a fresh cup of coffee and sat on the back deck. The ocean waves looked beautiful. I wondered how long it would take for them to notice. Sitting on the deck, I reviewed my household expenses. The financial boundaries I crossed earlier felt empowering, but I needed to address the root of the problem. Chloe's control over my life was not just territorial, it was deeply financial. I opened my laptop and scrutinized the joint savings account Mark and I shared since his college years. It was supposed to be an emergency fund, but I noticed recent withdrawals paying for Chloe's luxury car lease. Mark had quietly drained thousands without asking. The betrayal stung, but I refused to let tears fall. Crying changes nothing. Action changes everything. I immediately transferred the remaining balance into a private, individual account under my name alone. I left exactly $5 in the joint account to keep it open. I wanted Mark to see the balance the next time he tried to use my savings to fund his wife's lifestyle. My phone screen lit up again. It was the family group chat. Chloe was sending pictures of premium steaks and asking if I had purchased enough charcoal for the grill. Her mother replied, thanking me in advance for my hospitality. They were painting a beautiful picture of a weekend I was entirely excluded from planning. I felt a brief flicker of guilt, the old familiar pressure to conform and please. But then I looked at the empty, peaceful living room. This space belonged to me. I had worked 35 long years as a school administrator to afford this quiet comfort. I refused to spend my retirement serving as a silent ATM and an unpaid maid for people who did not respect me. I muted the group chat completely. I did not leave the group. I simply stopped receiving the endless notifications. I wanted the record of their demands preserved. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, I felt a deep sense of calm settle over me. The trap was set, not with malice, but with simple, undeniable ownership. Tomorrow would bring a storm. I was ready. Thursday evening arrived, and the house was perfectly quiet. I cooked a simple dinner of grilled salmon and asparagus, enjoying the silence. My phone began to vibrate relentlessly on the kitchen counter. It was a direct call from Chloe. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. 2 minutes later, a long text message arrived. She was annoyed. She demanded to know why I had not sent a picture of the filled refrigerator yet. She explicitly reminded me that her father needed his specific beer and that her sister's children required organic snacks. She told me to stop dragging my feet. The sheer audacity of her words would have shocked me a year ago. Tonight, it only confirmed that I was making the right choice. I replied with a single, polite sentence. I am currently relaxing and will not be buying groceries today. The response was almost instantaneous. Chloe texted back in all capital letters, demanding to know what I meant. She said the reunion started tomorrow and everyone was depending on me to prepare the house. I did not reply. I washed my dishes, dried my hands, and walked to the master bedroom. Chloe had claimed this room for her parents in the chat. I deliberately unpacked my suitcase, placed my favorite books on the nightstand, and laid my clothes across the large bed. I reclaimed my own space. Later, Mark called. His voice was tense, clearly pressured by Chloe. Mom, Chloe says you're acting weird about the groceries. Can you just go to the store? Please don't make this difficult. I listened to his nervous breathing. He just wanted me to submit so his life would be easier. Mark, I said calmly, I am not hosting a reunion. I am not buying groceries. Have a good night. I ended the call before he could formulate an argument. The boundary was drawn. I turned off the lamps, got into my comfortable bed, and closed my eyes. The ocean sounded incredibly soothing. They would arrive tomorrow. Friday morning broke with a brilliant, golden sunrise. I woke up feeling more rested than I had in months. There was no rushing to clean the floors, no frantic trips to the supermarket to buy expensive snacks I did not eat, and no anxious pacing. I made a pot of strong coffee and sat by the large window overlooking the driveway. I knew they planned to arrive around 2 in the afternoon to maximize their beach time. At 10 o'clock, I received an automated email notification from my credit card company. A transaction for a luxury gas station fill-up had been declined. Mark had tried to use the card I disabled yesterday. A few minutes later, Mark texted me. His tone panicked. Mom, the credit card isn't working. Is there a fraud alert? I picked up my phone and typed a precise, clear response. No fraud alert. I removed you as an authorized user. You will need to pay for your own gas from now on. I hit send and set the phone down. I could almost feel the shock radiating from the other side of the screen. He did not reply. He probably had to use his own debit card, likely facing Chloe's immediate anger. I spent the rest of the morning enjoying my home. I watered the indoor plants. I dusted the bookshelves. I listened to soft jazz music. The house felt entirely mine again. It felt completely disconnected from the chaotic demands of my son's wife. By noon, the group chat, which I occasionally checked just to observe, was buzzing with excitement. Chloe's relatives were posting photos of their packed cars, eagerly anticipating their free, catered vacation. None of them knew the reality of the situation. Chloe had built a beautiful illusion of control, and she was driving her entire family straight toward a locked door. I poured myself a fresh glass of iced tea. I sat near the window. The wait was almost over. The final lesson was approaching. At exactly 2:15, a large silver SUV pulled into my private driveway, followed closely by a minivan and Mark's sedan. I watched quietly from behind the sheer curtains in the living room. Chloe stepped out of the first vehicle, wearing designer sunglasses and carrying a large beach tote. She looked incredibly confident, pointing toward the house and directing her relatives like a seasoned tour guide. Her parents emerged from the minivan, stretching their legs and looking around approvingly. Mark parked last, looking exhausted and tense. Chloe walked confidently up to the front porch and approached the electronic keypad. She didn't even look toward the windows. She quickly punched in the old access code. A sharp, red light flashed, followed by a loud error beep. She frowned, muttered something, and punched the numbers in again, pressing harder this time. The red light flashed again. I watched her posture change from confident to irritated. She turned and yelled toward Mark, asking if he had changed the code. Mark shook his head, jogging up the steps. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his keychain. He confidently inserted his spare metal key into the deadbolt on the garage side door. He tried to turn it. It did not budge. He pulled it out, inspected it, and tried again with more force. The new lock held firm. I stood perfectly still, sipping my iced tea. Outside, confusion began to ripple through the group. Chloe's father walked up, asking what the holdup was. Chloe loudly complained that the lock must be broken or the battery was dead. She pulled out her phone and started calling me. My phone buzzed loudly on the kitchen counter. I looked at the caller ID flashing her name. I did not answer. I let it ring, let her wait. Let the reality of the locked door sink into her mind. The illusion of her authority was slowly breaking down right on my front porch. I waited calmly. After 3 missed calls, Chloe's frustration turned into visible anger. She began banging her open palm against the heavy wooden front door. "Eleanor, open the door. We know you are in there," she yelled. Her voice echoed loudly across the quiet driveway. Her relatives stood awkwardly near their cars, suddenly realizing this was not the seamless, welcoming vacation they had been promised. My phone rang again. This time, it was Chloe. I decided it was time to establish the final boundary. I picked up the phone and answered. "Eleanor, what is going on?" Chloe shouted, her voice sharp with panic and anger. "The code is not working, and Mark's key does not fit. We have 20 people standing outside." "Open the door." I did not raise my voice. I kept my tone perfectly even. "The codes are changed. Chloe, the locks are new. You cannot come in." There was a stunned silence, followed by her furious breathing. "You cannot do this," she snapped. "My family drove 4 hours. We have nowhere else to go. You planned a reunion at my house without asking me," I said. "You ordered me to buy groceries and give up my bedroom. I never agreed to host anyone. This is my private property, and I am not accepting guests this weekend. Eleanor, open this door right now." "No, Chloe. You do not own this house. You do not control me. Have a safe drive back home." Before she could scream another word, I pressed the red button. I simply hung up. The line went completely dead. I turned my phone on silent. There was nothing left to discuss. The scene outside my window quickly dissolved into absolute chaos. I watched from the shadows of the living room as the reality of my refusal hit the driveway. Chloe stood staring at her own phone in pure disbelief. She screamed at him, waving her arms wildly toward the house. Mark simply stood there, looking defeated, his shoulders slumped. He finally realized that his mother was no longer a safety net he could exploit. The true damage, however, was happening within Chloe's own family. Her parents approached her, their faces red with embarrassment and anger. I could not hear their exact words through the thick glass, but their aggressive gestures made it entirely clear. They were demanding answers. They realized Chloe had lied to them. She had promised them free access to a luxurious beach house she had absolutely no authority over. The confident, commanding daughter-in-law was now publicly exposed as an entitled fraud in front of her entire family. Chloe tried to blame me, pointing angrily at the locked door, but her father shook his head in disgust. He turned around, ordered his wife back into the minivan, and slammed the door shut. The other relatives began awkwardly packing away the beach chairs they had prematurely unloaded. The tension in the air was thick and suffocating. Mark tried to comfort Chloe, but she pushed him away, completely humiliated. They had assumed my silence meant compliance. They had mistaken my past generosity for permanent weakness. Now, faced with a simple, locked door and a silent phone, they had absolutely no power. It took less than 20 minutes for the cars to start their engines. One by one, the vehicles backed out of my driveway, kicking up loose gravel. Chloe got into Mark's car, refusing to look back at the house. They drove away, heading toward town to desperately search for expensive, last-minute hotel rooms on a busy holiday weekend. The driveway was empty again. The rest of the weekend passed in glorious, uninterrupted peace. I read 3 entire books, took long walks along the shoreline, and slept deeply through the night. The silence in the house was no longer lonely. It was profoundly comforting. It was the sound of my own independence. By Monday morning, I finally checked my emails. There was a long, emotional message from Mark. He apologized for his passivity, admitted he had allowed Chloe to cross the line, and begged for a chance to talk. I read it carefully. I did not reply immediately. Forgiveness would come, eventually, but it would be on my strict terms, and it would take time. The financial access would never be restored. The spare key would never be replaced. Chloe would never dictate my actions again. They had learned a painful but necessary lesson. You cannot treat a person like an object and expect them to provide shelter when it rains. I walked onto the back deck with my morning coffee. The sun was rising, casting a warm, golden light over the endless ocean waves. I breathed in the fresh, salty air and smiled. I had not needed lawyers, arguments, or dramatic confrontations to protect my life. I only needed to recognize my own worth and close the door on disrespect. The beach house was exactly what I had always intended it to be, a sanctuary. It was my home, my rules, and my peace. I placed my coffee mug on the railing and watched the seagulls fly over the dunes. I felt incredibly light, as if a heavy weight had finally been lifted from my shoulders. If you ever find yourself being used by the people who should love you the most, remember that your boundaries are your strongest armor. You hold the keys to your own life. Never be afraid to use them. Everything will be okay.